Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this Monday. It's already July 23rd, 2018, a day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. In the last few days, we've been talking about the connection of the Jesuit-Vatican connection to the assassinations of Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, and John F. Kennedy. We've mentioned that in the past. And, you know, over the weekend, I ran into this. It's a 2 minutes and 6 second video, and it says this: Abraham Lincoln and JFK, weird or what? And I want you to listen to it a minute, and there's some things on here that are quite interesting. It only takes 2 minutes.
Was elected to Congress in 1846. John Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Abe Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John Kennedy was elected president in 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy both contain 7 letters. Both presidents were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both of the presidents' wives lost children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday in the head. President Lincoln's secretary was named Miss Kennedy. Kennedy's secretary was named Miss Lincoln. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Lincoln, was born in 1839. Lee Harvey Oswald, who assassinated Kennedy in 1939. Both assassins were known by 3 names: John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. President Lincoln was shot in a theater named Ford. Kennedy was shot in a car named Lincoln, made by Ford. John Wilkes Booth ran to a theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Booth and Oswald were both assassinated before they could go to trial. And a week before Lincoln was shot, he was in Monroe, Maryland. A week before Kennedy was shot, he was with Marilyn Monroe.
Okay, I bet you that was a few things you didn't hear before about Abe Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. And if you go back to some of my old shows, you'll get a lot of information of the Vatican-Jesuit connection to the Kennedy assassination. But today, let's discuss some things you might not get in the history books if you pay for a college education in America, or even a higher education and become a master. You get a master's degree in history, get a doctor's degree in history. You may not even get this if you don't dig deep on your own. Let's look at some of Lincoln's last days. On April 6th, 1865, President Lincoln was invited by General Grant to enter the captured capital of South, Richmond. The beaten armies of Lee were forced to lay down their arms and their banners at the feet of the generals of Lincoln. After 5 long, bloody years, the war was finally over. 8 days later, the great President Lincoln would be shot dead by the arm of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, let's look at John Wilkes Booth, the final scene. But was it? It's a great cover-up after Booth killed Lincoln. But on April 14th, 1865, the President of the United States and his wife attended a performance of the humorous Our American Cousin. Nothing but a tool of the Jesuits, the assassin Booth, murdered Lincoln in Ford's Theater at 10 o'clock p.m. during the second scene of the third act of the play. The newspapers of the time quoted Booth as uttering the Latin phrase sic tempor tyrannis, thus always to tyrants, which is the Virginia state motto, and a fulfillment of the Jesuit oath. Booth kept to the stage, and Booth leapt to the stage and broke his leg, the fibula, upon impact. He left town on horseback, followed by another co-conspirator, David Harold. The chase went on for nearly 2 weeks until cavalry officers caught up with Booth outside Port Royal. He was holed up in a barn, a storage, or a warehouse of the Garrett farm. After setting the barn afire, one of the soldiers fired a single shot to Booth's head. Booth expired in a great agony on April 26, 12 days after the commission of his crime. And the conspiracy continues to unfurl. At the precise same time as Booth's murderous assault on Lincoln, something you never get really in the history books, or if you do, it's not emphasized. A co-conspirator named Lewis Payne, a son of a Protestant minister, had brutally attacked Lincoln's Secretary of State William Seward, wounding him badly. And General Grant and Vice President Andy Johnson were also said to be marked for death at the exact same time. On the evening of the 13th, a man appeared at Secretary Stanton's house where General Grant was that evening, had asked to have both Grant and Secretary Stanton pointed out to him, which was done. He did not speak to either of them, and lingered in the hall watching them, and sat down on a step of the front steps until he was driven away. Grant's would-be attacker, Irish Catholic Michael O'Laughlin, could not accomplish his task because Grant had changed his plans at the last minute due to an ill family member. Earlier in the evening of the 14th, Booth had called at the Kirkwood house where Vice President Johnson was stopping, and left a card on which he was written, "Don't wish to disturb you. Are you at home? J. Wilkes Booth." To do this, it is not known if the Johnson attempt was just a ruse to cover up any possibility of being implicated in the conspiracy. Johnson's appointed assassin, professed Catholic George Atzerodt, said he became frightened and stayed home rather than perpetrate the dastardly deed. Later, among other testimony, Atzerodt's confession would expose the conspiracy further. A small red book, which was actually an 1864 appointment book kept as a diary, found on the body of John Wilkes Booth on April 26, 1865. The day before he died, Booth had written in his daily memoirs, "I can never repent, though we hated to kill. Our country owed all her troubles to him, and God simply made me the instrument of his punishment." Compare this with John 16:2. "They shall put you out of the synagogues, yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he has done God's service." Now, in his daily memoirs, he said, "For 6 months," Booth is saying this, "we had worked to capture, but our cause being almost lost, something decisive and great must be done. But its failure was owing to others who did not strike for their country with a heart. I struck boldly, and not as papers say. I walked with a firm step through 1,000 of his friends, was stopped but pushed on. A colonel was at his side. I shouted, 'Sic semper tyrannis,' before I fired, and jumping, broke my leg. I passed all his pickets, rode 60 miles that night with the bone of my leg tearing the flesh at every jump. I can never repent it, though we hated to kill. Our country owed all her troubles to him, and God simply made me the instrument of his punishment." That was in Booth's memoirs. Now, Charles Chiniquy, the former Catholic priest, had cried out to an unlistening public, quote, "And after 20 years of constant and most difficult researches, I came fearlessly today before the American people to say and prove that President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by the Jesuits of Rome." Now, on our show, many times we discussed the part of the conspiracy where John Surratt was one of the co-conspirators that escaped, ended up being protected by the Catholic Church in Montreal, then sent to the Vatican in Rome, where he was hidden out as a Swiss guard, until some of our investigators and our patriots found out he was there. And so Rome at that time let him loose. He was caught in Egypt, brought back to trial. And, you never hear any of this in our history books. Now, Surratt's mother was Mary Surratt, and most of the meetings with the Jesuit priests to kill Lincoln were held at her house with these priests. Now, it's also known that the Jesuit priests back then, they were talking in Minnesota and this was overheard by a shopkeeper, that Lincoln was dead, and this was 3 hours before it occurred. Very interesting, right? We'll get back to some more information about Lincoln right now. Before I get back to more hidden information about the co-conspirators and the assassination of Abraham Lincoln by the Jesuits in the Vatican, what strikes me is that all of this stuff is hidden from us, and history is rewritten. And so you have to ask the question, what other things have they hidden from us? And if you start researching all of the stories they tell you about major characters in history, it's all upside down. And we went through much of this. We did a whole look at President Eisenhower and how he's connected to the Jesuits and why he was selected as the commander-in-chief in World War II. It's just amazing. As you move from one story to the other, you see this Jesuit-Vatican connection and how history has been turned upside down to keep their evil ways from coming forth to the public. And so that's why no matter what you hear, even today, why Trump is in office, why Obama was selected as president, why all these policies, just look at Benghazi, look at 9/11, look at what Trump is doing today with North Korea. There's always a hidden ulterior motive. And we're watching history unfold right now, so start thinking in terms of, in the future, they're going to rewrite it anyway for people to figure out. So let's try to help them figure it out right now, so that hopefully some of this information that's vital continues on. And looking back at what they did to Lincoln, what happened to Kennedy and other presidents, it's remarkable. The statement I can make is, if you don't follow and play ball with the Vatican-led New World Order, the Vatican Jesuit-led New World Order, you're going to find yourself in the same position that Kennedy and Lincoln found themselves in. And just imagine, if they can kill a president of the United States, they can just about do it to anybody, and you bet they will, and they have. Just think about former Senator Paul Wellstone. Even think, you got to wonder about Sonny Bono, Congressman Sonny Bono, and others who may have really violated what could be the Jesuit oath or their loyalty to the Pope in Rome. That is why all these presidents go to Rome and bow down and kiss the pontiff's ring, as well as when you hear the mainstream media talk in glowing terms of the Vatican, you know why. Because they are together in the pocket of the Vatican and the New World Order to bring about a one-world government, one-world religion. And what that means is your rights are all but gone. Now, back to some of the hidden information about the co-conspirators. We still have historical proof in the book of the testimonies given in the trial, published by Ben Pittman in the 2 volumes of the trial of John Surratt, 1867. How many people even know that occurred? There was some other people, put up for trial. Regarding the Lincoln assassination, it wasn't a lone gunman, just as Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't a lone gunman. However, 99% of the American population will believe that because that's what they're told, and they're lied to. Now, all of these great scholars, all of these great lawyers that come on, Alan Dershowitz and all these other people that come on the news, whether it be Fox or CNN, They're smart enough to look into history, and they're smart enough to read all these cases. And they could give us the truth, but they are bought and paid off just as the others are. And that's why you cannot trust anything that comes across your cable networks, anything that comes across your government channels, because they've lied to us for hundreds of years, and they're going to continue to do that. Now these, by the documentation of these trials, and we're not even talking about the trial of Chiniquy and that Lincoln represented when the Jesuits tried to shut Chiniquy up, and Lincoln freed him or found him innocent for trumped up charges of rape. And during that trial in Illinois, he brought out the Vatican plot to overthrow our country by bringing the Bishop of Chicago on and testifying to all this. And the Jesuits sat there, fuming over. And Chiniquy told him after the trial, they will never forget you. Now, this documentation of these trials of these co-conspirators, there's legal and irrefutable proof that the plot of the assassins of Lincoln was fostered in the house of Mary Surratt, number 561 H Street, Washington, D.C. The sworn testimony showed that this house was a common rendezvous of the priests of Washington, Jesuits. Several priests confessed that they were going there, although could not recall how often, of course. This house sometimes held over 10 priests at a time. One of them, less on his guard, swore that he seldom passed before that house without entering, and he never passed less than once a week. The devoted Roman Catholic, ex-Protestant and Jesuit professor of Gonzaga College, Louis J. Weichman, and local priests Father Wiggett and Lehman admit they were living with Mrs. Surratt in the same house. Now, Gonzaga is a Jesuit university. Okay. You probably know them for their basketball prowess. The method of operation reeks heavily of Jesuitism. And you got to read the history of the assassinations of Admiral Coligny, Henry III, and Henry V, and William the Taciturn by hired assassins of the Jesuits. Compare them with the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and you will find that one resembles others exactly. Like I've always said in the show, history, they repeat what they do. Now, where are our politicians ever going to get this smart? That's why they use the Jesuits. You will also understand that they all come from the same source, Rome. In all those murders, you will find that the murderers selected and trained by the Jesuits were of the most exalted Roman Catholic piety, living in the company of priests, going to confess very often, receiving the communion the day before, if not the very day of the murder. You will see in all those horrible deeds of hell, prepared behind the dark walls of the Holy Inquisition, that the assassins were considered themselves as the chosen instruments of God to save the nations by striking its tyrant, that they firmly believed that there was no sin in killing the enemy of the people of the Holy Church and of the infallible Pope. A letter was found in Lincoln's files, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. Let me check the time. I got about 5 minutes. A letter was found in Lincoln's files and used as a court exhibit. It showed that other attempts were made upon Lincoln's life by this conspiracy group, and that the Jesuit methods were to be employed. The letter was dropped by Booth in a train car and sent by an eyewitness to the president, who wrote upon it assassination and filed it away on November 17, 1864. It reads as follows. Dear Louis Weichman, the time has come at last that we have also wished for, and upon you everything depends. As was decided before you left, we were to cast lots. We accordingly did so, and you are to be Charlotte Corday of the 19th century. When you remember the fearful solemn vow that was taken by us, you will feel there is no drawback. Abe must die, and now. You can choose your weapons, the cup, the knife, the bullet. This comes right from the Jesuit oaths. The cup failed us once and might again. Johnson, who will give this, has been like an enraged demon since the meeting, because it has not fallen to him to rid the world of the monster. You know where to find your friends. Your disguises are so perfect and complete that without no one knew your face, no police telegraph dispatch would catch you. The English gentleman Harcourt must not act hastily. Remember, he has 10 days. Strike for your home, strike for your country, bide your time, but strike for sure. Get introduced, congratulate him, listen to his stories. Not many more will the brute tell to earthly friends. Do anything but fail, and meet us at the appointed place within the fortnight. You will probably hear from me in Washington. Sanders is doing us no good in Canada. Chas Selby, co-conspirator. See how this coincides with the excerpt of the Jesuit oath? And let me read that. Let's see if we have time in this half hour. If not, I'll come back to it. Yeah, we have 3 minutes. I furthermore promise and declare that I will, when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, that I will hang, waste, boil, flail, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their race forever. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poison cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet. Regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, and authority of the person or persons, whatever may be the condition in their life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed so to do so by an agent of the Pope, or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. Wow. Now, you see, this letter, let's see, we got a few minutes here. This letter not only reeks of the Jesuit oath, the one I read before, it actually admits that they tried to poison Abe once before. And it just so happens that co-conspirator Davy Harold was a drug clerk, proficient in the modern sorcery of pharmacy poisons. Booth also intended to use the knife, during the poniard, during Lincoln's second inauguration, and was present but did not follow through. He finally succeeded with the .44 caliber leaden bullet. And in the next half hour, we're going to go into further evidence of religious undertones in the Lincoln assassination. And, as we look at this, please do your own, homework on this. There's so much out there. And we've tried over the years to get as much of this information as possible on the air, because you're not going to get it in too many other places. And what I noticed, though, is that the amount of people that look at these videos compared to what the mainstream gets is really indicative of why people do not understand this story. Because one, they have been brainwashed, propagandized to the point that anything, even if you present factual evidence, court cases, trials, testimony, they just don't believe it. You could tell them 100 times and they will refuse, because one, they have an ingrained belief system that's been put there by years and years of lies and propaganda. That's why in every one of these stories, they do not change their story. For example, if you look at 9/11, they knew who did it 10 minutes after 9/11, and it's been the same way ever since. And then the mainstream media today, even to this day, ingrains it in their head, and you get less and less info but that same story. 9/11, they never say the truth that it was an inside job, just like they'll never tell you the truth that the Jesuits in the Vatican were involved in the Lincoln and Kennedy assassinations and many others. That's where we're at. And so by giving this information out, hopefully 1 or 2 or 3 people can continue and then spread that out, because in the years to come, I still predict there's going to be less and less of this information, even though the internet will expand more and more. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet. or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, welcome back to the second half hour of this Monday show. And remember, go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com, and you can get shows going back well over a decade regarding what I call the Vatican-led New World Order. Okay, further evidence of religious undertones, Vatican Jesuit undertones, in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And we mentioned this as an exceptional and remarkable fact, quote, this is quotes, that every conspirator in custody is by education a Catholic. And a U.S. General Baker pointed that out. Now, here's some circumstantial evidence. After spending many years in Catholic prep school and 2 years in Jesuit college, John Surratt studied to be in the Roman priesthood for 3 years at a Jesuit monastery. After the assassination, he was confirmed to be in the military service of the Pope in Rome, and we talked about that. He was hid out after he escaped, was hid out in Montreal, then was sent to the Vatican. He was put there as a Swiss Guard, which was led by the general of the Jesuits, of the so-called Black Pope, at the time, Cardinal Giacomo Antonelli. Weichmann was a Jesuit professor. Harold graduated from a Jesuit college at Georgetown. Samuel Mudd, the doctor who splintered Booth's broken leg, was a Catholic who met Booth at a mass. The conspirators were all part of connected to the Knights of the Golden Circle. When he was shot, John Wilkes Booth was wearing a Catholic medallion, which said in the Latin language of the priest, Agnus Dei, meaning Lamb of God, which signified the sacrifice, the shedding of blood, which he would offer the Pope and the Catholic citizens in America. It is interesting to note that upon Lincoln's death, numerous letters of condolence were sent to the U.S. government from every civilized nation in the world, except the Papal States of Rome and the Pope. Here's an excerpt of a court affidavit of one Henry de Saint Marie, who taught at Jesuit Gonzaga College with Weichmann, one of the co-conspirators. Quote, I was acquainted with Louis J. Weichmann and John H. Surratt. After some conversation we spoke of the assassination of President Lincoln, and these were his Surratt's words, damn Yankees, they have killed my mother, but I have done them as much harm as I could. We have killed Lincoln, the nigger's friend. Had it been for me and that coward Weichmann, my mother would be living yet. It was a fear that made him speak. He says he can't get money in Rome anytime. He says he can get money in Rome anytime. I believe he is protected by the clergy and that the murder is the result of a deep-laid plot, not only against the life of Lincoln, but against the existence of the Republic. And what this man is saying, Henry de Saint Marie, who taught at Jesuit, is that the Vatican conspiracy to overthrow this country was alive and well, and is alive and well today. And that's why you don't hear of any of this. As we are aware, that priesthood and the royalty are, and always have been, opposed to liberty. That such men as Surratt, Booth, Weichmann, and others of their own accord planned and executed the infernal plot which resulted in the death of Lincoln is impossible. Folks, just like it's impossible that Lee Harvey Oswald could kill Kennedy alone. There are others behind the curtain who have pulled the strings to make these scoundrels act, and we say that those scoundrels were involved in the Jesuit and Vatican order. Jesuit order and the Vatican behind it. In 1897, Thomas S. Harris, a member of the 1865 Military Commission, wrote a book entitled Rome's Responsibility for the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Now, how come that's not in required reading in every American university when you talk about Lincoln? Because the books that are put there are screened by the Jesuits. It's Jesuitism at its best, covering the truth, detailing this book detailing the played down role of the Vatican in this murder. The fatal mistake of the American government in the prosecution of the assassins of Lincoln was to constantly keep out of sight the religious element of that terrible drama. And that's what they do today, folks. In most everything, any trial, judges are paid to lie and keep the Vatican out of it. That's the truth. Nothing would have been more easy than to find out the complicity of these priests, who were not only coming every week and every day, but who were living in that den of murderers. But this was carefully avoided from the beginning to the end of the trial, so the fix was even in there. Just like the fix was in anything that had to do with the Warren Commission, or anything that had to do with the 9/11 Commission, etc., etc. Now, let our prime witness, Charles Chiniquy, back this up. Listen what he says. When not long after the execution of the murderers, I, Charles Chiniquy, went incognito to Washington to begin my investigation about its true and real authors. I was not a little surprised to see that not a single one of the government men to whom I addressed myself would consent to have any talk with me on the matter, except after I had given my word of honor that I would never mention their names in connection with the result of my investigation. I saw with a profound distress that the influence of Rome was almost supreme in Washington. I could not find a single statesman who would dare to face the nefarious influence and fight it down. Now just think today, That's exactly what's going on today, but it's worse. If you try to get any connection of Rome to any wrongdoings of major scale, like 9/11, JFK, you're going to receive the same treatment that Chiniquy did back then. Now, several of the government men in whom Chiniquy had more confidence told him this: "We had not the least doubt that the Jesuits were at the bottom of that great iniquity. We even feared sometimes that this would come out so clearly before the military tribunal that there would be no possibility of keeping it out of the public sight. This was not, though, cowardice as you think, but through a wisdom which you ought to approve if you cannot admire it. Had we been in days of peace, we know that with a little more pressure on the witness, many priests would have been compromised, for Mrs. Surratt's house was their common rendezvous. It is more than probable that several of them might have been hung, but the Civil War was hardly over. The Confederacy, though broken down, was still living in millions of hearts. Murderers and formidable elements of discord were still seen everywhere, to which the hanging or exiling of those priests would have given a new life. Riots after riots would have accompanied and followed their execution. We thought we had had enough of blood, fires, devastation, and bad feelings. We were all longing after days of peace. The country was in need of them. We concluded that the best interests of humanity was to punish only those who were publicly and visibly guilty, that the verdict might receive the approbation of all, without creating any new bad feelings. Allow us also tell you that this policy was that of our late president, for you know it well. There was nothing which that good or great man feared so much as the arm of the Protestants against the Catholics, and the Catholics against the Protestants." And that was Chiniquy talking in 50 years of the Church of Rome. So let's look at this. In Burke McCarty, she said this in her introduction. It's a small black book. You can get it, The Suppressed Truth About the Assassination of Lincoln. She says this: "I feel safe in stating that nowhere else can be found in one book the connected presentation of a story leading up to the death of Lincoln." This is the introduction to McCarthy's book, McCarty's book, written about her in the book. The story leading up to the death of Lincoln, which was instigated by the Black Pope and the General of the Jesuit Order, camouflaged by the White Pope, Pius IX, aided and abetted and financed by other divine writers of Europe, and finally consummated by the Roman hierarchy and their paid agents in this country and French Canada, on Good Friday night, April 14th, 1865, at Ford's Theater, Washington, D.C. I'm convinced that this knowledge can be given adequate distribution and placed in possession of the boys and girls of public elementary schools, for whom it is especially designed to reach. That the wicked boast of the Jesuits and their lay agents, the Knights of Columbus, to make America Catholic can never be accomplished. Here's the deal. That's the introduction to that book, written in 1922. Has this information ever gotten to grade school kids, high school kids, college kids? No. Why? You know why. Because the Jesuit hand is too strong in this country. They've bought and paid off every top person in our government and our judiciary. Otherwise, we'd get the truth about this, and we would have a whole different view about the Vatican in America. And that this story, the reestablishment of history, before it was disguised by underhanded Jesuitical powers, the reason for this goes beyond setting the record straight. This should serve to warn people that the papal forces and motives did not end with the last Inquisition. Although the Catholic Church has taken a seemingly demure stance in quiet, peaceful appearance, at least publicly, it does not mean that their goals have changed. They have recently, in 1999, signed an agreement with the Lutheran Church, unifying their doctrine on salvational justification by faith, which is a real truth. On the anniversary of Martin Luther beginning the Protestant Reformation like a lion, the modern Lutheran Church rescinds the Reformation, no longer protesting, walking meekly into the arms of the Catholic Church like a lamb before the slaughter. They have forgotten all their founders had taught them. They even forgot that he wanted, here's what he said, Martin Luther, "I know that the Pope is Antichrist, and his seat is that of Satan himself." Martin Luther said that. Reader and listener, please consider the following quotations when regarding the current pacifist attitude of the Church of Rome. Now, we'll get to that in one. Okay, so like I said, please consider these following quotations regarding the current pacifist attitude of the Church of Rome and the Jesuits. One quotation on the Jesuits. Let's read this. A man may swear that he hath not done a thing, though he really have, by understanding within himself that he did it not on such and such a day or before he was born, or by reflecting on some other circumstance of the like nature, and yet the words he shall make use of shall have a sense of implying any such thing, and that this is a thing of great convenience on many occasions, and is always justifiable when it is necessary or advantageous in anything that occurs a man's health, honor, or state. Now, in the syllabus of Pope Pius IX, December 1864, it was said, quote, "The state has not the right to leave every man free to embrace whatever religion he shall deem true. The Church has the right to require that the Catholic religion shall be the religion of the state, to the exclusion of all others. Cursed be those who assert liberty of conscience and worship, and such that maintain that the Church may not employ force." This coming from Pope Pius VII's encyclical in 1808. It was proposed that all religious persuasion should be free and the worship publicly exercised, but we have rejected this article as contrary to the canons and councils of the Catholic Church. And this is the way, and as I say, this has not changed. This is still the canons and council of the Catholic Church. Now, in the Pittsburgh Catholic Visitor, in July of 1848, the official journal of that bishop, here's what he says. "Moreover, we declare, affirm, define, and pronounce it to be necessary to salvation every human creature to be subject to the Roman pontiff." Folks, that hasn't changed to this day. This was stated in the Shepherd of the Valley official journal of the Bishop of St. Louis on November 23, 1851. Quote, "The Church is of necessity intolerant. Heresy she endures when and where she must, but she hates it and directs all her energies to destroy it." Now, in the New York Freeman, official journal of Bishop Hughes, January 26, 1852, he states this, "No man has a right to choose his religion. Catholicism is the most intolerant of creeds. It is intolerance itself. We might as rationally maintain that 2 and 2 does not make 4 as the theory of religious liberty. Its impiety is only equaled by its absurdity." Now, in the Catholic World, July 1870, it said this, "Protestantism has not and never can have any right where Catholicism has triumphed. Therefore, we lose the breath we expend and declaiming against bigotry and intolerance and in favor of religious liberty or the right of any man to be of any religion as best pleases him." Now, this is said by the Reverend O'Connor, Bishop of Pittsburgh. "Religious liberty is merely endured until the opposite can be carried into effect without peril to the Catholic Church." Now, on December 24th, 1908, in the Western Watchman, it stated, "The Catholic Church has persecuted when she thinks it is good. To use physical force, she will use it. Will the Catholic Church give bond that she will not persecute? The Catholic Church gives no bonds for her good behavior." Okay, so history does repeat itself, folks. And it's not so distant history to know of Jesuit terror. So let's go over a couple things. In 1757, the Jesuit confessors were driven out of the Portuguese royal family, and members of society were forbidden to preach in Catholic Portugal. The Prime Minister banned the society from all its territories. The Marquis of Pombal in 1757 drove out the Jesuit confessors from the royal family and forbade the order to preach. Eventually, he banished the society from all his territories, and it seemed that all liberals expelled the Jesuits and that the Jesuits only flourished where tolerant Protestantism was in the majority, such as England, Sweden, Denmark, and the United States. In April 1762, The society was accused of using covert means in France to usurp all authority. On April 6 the same year, the French Parliament accused the Jesuits of being a political body, of working untiringly and usurping all authority by all kinds of indirect, secret, and devious means. The statement of arrests also described the order as 1. Perverse, a destroyer of all religious and honest principles, insulting to Christian morals, pernicious to civil society, hostile to the rights of the nation and royal power, and even the security of the sovereign and obedience of their subjects, suitable to stir up the greatest disturbance of the states, conceive and maintain the worst kind of corruption in men's hearts. Clement XIII was trying since 1758 to suppress the Society of Jesus, and on February 2nd, 1769, at least publicly, we're told he died, the night before he was to tell the College of Cardinals about his decision to comply with the wishes of the courts to suppress the Jesuits. Now, we talked before about possibly this being a Jesuit setup to disband them right before the during the American Revolution, so that they could get their dirty hands in the United States, and the Protestants here thinking their enemy had already been defeated, which was a big mistake. Now in 1773, suppression was ordered by Clement XIV, and he said, "This suppression will kill me, and I've cut off my right hand." On September 22nd, 1774, the Pope was poisoned. Now in 1774, the Empress of Austria had also banned the order, which was welcome educationally only in Prussia until 1786 and Russia. The Jesuits were banned from Russia in 1786, but we know that they remained still because they were very instrumental in the work and the mentorship of Joseph Stalin. Okay? So they were banned in 1786 publicly. In the U.S., the money for the first Bank of North America and the first Bank of the United States came from the Jesuit war chest. Jesuits were banished from Spain in 1820, from Portugal in 1834, from Spain in 1835, from Switzerland in 1848. In Italy, their colleagues and establishments were gradually taken from the Jesuits starting in 1859. The Jesuits were banished from Spain in 1868 and from Germany in 1872. In Latin America, they were suppressed in Guatemala in 1872, Mexico 1873, Brazil 1874, Ecuador and Colombia 1875, Costa Rica 1884. The Jesuits were twice banished from France in 1880 and 1901. Since that time, the society has integrated in former enemies, at least at lower levels of discipleship, such as Masonic groups. They have continued to rewrite history. They have taken control of the U.S. educational system to ultimately control your children. They have infiltrated into positions and vocations of power at all levels and authority to prepare to reestablish the dominion of Rome. The unholy Roman Empire has not changed her plans. She will dominate when time is right, when she has sufficient power, though the host countries that she acts as a parasite, attaches herself to, then she will throw off her disguise, reveal herself and her army of Jesuit soldiers. Do not fear her, but know her dangers and seek protection. Read the word and pray. It was Horace Greeley, yes, the guy who said, "Go West, young man," who said, quote, "It is impossible to enslave mentally or socially a Bible-reading people. The principles of the Bible are the groundwork of human freedom. America and other nations that were founded on godly principles of liberty and freedom are under such special attack, and though the subtle and not so subtle lying, changes in history books, school curriculums, and the reporting of media, we have lost the identity and the truth. U.S. General Grant himself had said, quote, "The Bible is the sheet anchor of our liberties." This is the answer we need to. Now you need to what? We need to know. We need to read the Word a little bit better, and we need to understand the facts that I've given to you on this show and others have given to you. So, let's see how much time we have left. And we got about 3 or 4 minutes. So what I did want to mention is that there's so much out there that's been hidden. Go and do your own homework on it, and you'll understand that this story continues to grow and grow and grow if you do the work. And if you don't, you're going to fall prey to all of the things I just mentioned about how our educational system and the history lessons in it have been rewritten. How, if you don't do your own research, you'll never understand this story. And the facts behind it are right there for you to read. And so if once you realize that 99% of the American public remain ignorant to this story, and that is why you're going to get criticism if you start bringing it up, is really the only way to ever understand what your country is about and what religion or faith you were brought into if you don't get a grasp of what Rome did in the past, what the Jesuits have done since the Protestant Reformation, and what they're doing through the time of the American Revolution, through the time of the founding of our country, through the time of Lincoln and presidents of the past, as well as what they've done in modern times regarding World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, what they've done in Korea, what they're doing in North Korea today, and what they're setting up the world for in the future. And all of the things going on in China, in Russia, in America are geared towards bringing the whole world under the control of Rome. And that's what this is all about. And so when people and countries make decisions, you can bet that behind the scenes, those pulling the puppet strings are definitely the Vatican Jesuit, what I call New World Order, working towards that final goal, which we've talked about on this show today. And remember that Rome never, ever changes. Although they may tell you they do, and they seem to be acting very docile right now, that's not the way they are behind the scenes. And so they'll say one thing publicly and another privately, which is their goal. They can't get away with this. And that's why the media lies about it. And that's why the media and our government is in the pocket of Rome. That is why our presidents go and kiss the Pope's ring. That is why the Protestants have fallen under the umbrella of Rome, the ecumenical movement. And that is why America is in trouble. Back tomorrow, Tuesday, on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.